You remember the sun of Auschwitz and the green of the distant meadows, lightly lifted by the clouds by birds, no longer green in the clouds, but sea green white. Together, we stood looking into the distance and felt the faraway green of the meadows and the clouds sea green white within us, as if the color of the distant meadows were our blood or the pulse beating within us, as if the world existed only through us and nothing changed as long as we were there. I remember your smile as elusive as a shade of the color of the wind, a leaf trembling on the edge of sun and shadow, fleeting yet always there. So you are for me today in the sea green sky, the greenery, and the leaf rustling wind. I feel you in every shadow, every movement, and you put the world around me like your arms. I feel the world as your body. You look into my eyes and call me with the whole world. Taking a comfortable seat, feet flat, hands just rested, relaxed on top of your lap, closing the eyes or half closing, whatever feels comfortable. And lengthening the neck. Softening the shoulders. And then letting them soften again. It takes a lot to ungrip, to let go the rope. The muscles of the face, around the eyes, the tightness in the jaw, the stiffness in your mouth. Just as an experiment, let it all go. And then just feel your awareness beginning to concentrate in the middle of your forehead. And as you let down the drawbridge of the heart, and allow for that openness, that willingness to have your heart broken when it opens. Just let your breath rise like mercury to that place where your attention is focused in the middle of your forehead. Like one of those strongman games at the fair. Breath rises up, that conduit between the heart and the head. And it reaches the peak. And then just a little pause. And then release. Four counts in. And 5 counts out. So that the conduit, that tube that your breath travels from the heart to the head, that's the organ of the mind. It's both heart and head. This is what I tell my students is the smartest part of them when they're writing poems. The part that's revealed when they're not trying to be a poet, trying to write a wise poem. It's the road less traveled. Just relaxing everything again. Shoulders, the drawbridge of the heart, the hands in this pose of receiving, feet flat, just feeling yourself in it. The Sun of Auschwitz by Tadeusz Borowski. You remember the sun of Auschwitz and the green of the distant meadows lightly lifted to the clouds by birds. No longer green in the clouds, but sea green white. Together we stood looking into the distance and felt the faraway green of the meadows and the clouds, sea green white, within us, as if the color of the distant meadows were our blood or the pulse beating within us, as if the world existed only through us and nothing changed as long as we were there. I remember your smile as elusive as a shade of the color of the wind, a leaf trembling on the edge of sun and shadow, fleeting yet always there. So you are for me today, in the sea green sky, the greenery and the leaf rustling wind. I feel you in every shadow, every movement, and you put the world around me like your arms. Put the world around me like your arms. I feel the world as your body. You look into my eyes and call me with the whole world. As many of you know, January 27th, 2025 was the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz by the Red Army. 80 years. And on the site for Auschwitz-Birkenau, there's a very moving quotation by someone who was attending, a former prisoner who was attending, and who said, this is a very special one because it's the last time that we'll be there. There were 1 million people who passed through this camp, which was like a city. Mostly Jews, also political prisoners and Roma. But when the Red Army came in January of 1945, there were only 7,000 people there. And just by grace and luck, I met one of those 7,000 people 30 years ago. It was the 50th anniversary, or approaching, And I took my students to Auschwitz-Birkenau, along with some other teachers from Friedeck Mistek when I was living in the Czech Republic. We went by bus and we drove into the parking lot, that recognizable gate and the train tracks that are going into a dead end. And there was a man standing there speaking in broken English, talking about his experience in the camp as a 16-year-old, and he was now 66 years old. And he described how on the day of liberation, now 80 years ago, the prisoners still alive went out into this place where they were standing and ate the grass and dug into the grass for protein of any kind. And he looked back at the gate and he said, the most amazing thing is that I lived here and even I can't believe that this happened. So he was this incredible figure of resilience. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he lived another 30 years and was one of those people who came back for the 80th anniversary. But what he did for all of us, which I never forgot, was that he showed us his tattoo. And someone in the crowd asked him why he kept it. And he replied that he thought about removing the tattoo, but ultimately decided that it had to stay because if he removed it and tried to deny that this had ever happened to him, then it would be everywhere. By keeping the tattoo, he said, he knew that it would be part of him, but not all of him. And it's something I always remembered because I associate it so much with what poetry is and does. That poetry, poem by poem, witness by witness, sets down some of me, but not the sum of me. And I say it over and over to myself. I think about him all the time. This is some of me, but not the sum of me. What's happening now in the world or in this country is some of us, but not the sum of us. And this poem really goes deep into that space. Tadeusz Borowski died when he was 28. He died by his own hand, like many people who survived Auschwitz but couldn't bear to go on. And he died in 1951. But in this poem, he's really talking about how to survive. He's eating the grass and the clouds. He's going out through the gates by making the world a part of him. It's very tantric, where he becomes the whole world. And he's in conversation with this you. If you look at the poem, you'll see that there's a you remember, and then in the middle, there's an I remember. And they're kind of in conversation. But I feel deeply that the speaker of this poem is talking about someone who's no longer there. So there is this very deep kind of elegiac mourning that's going on as well. He reminds me of somebody else that I met when I was living in the Czech Republic. This is an incredible story. I was singing at a jazz club and went out into the parking lot on our break, and a man followed me out who was no older than 50. He was a young guy. And he began to pace around and say, I need to talk to you about something. And he had an accent. He was speaking beautiful English, but a German accent or something. And he told me his name was Solomonovich. And he said that he was in Auschwitz. And I asked him immediately, how old were you? Because he didn't look old enough to have been in Auschwitz 50 years before. He said, I was 4 years old in Auschwitz, and my first memories are of Auschwitz. And I said, how did you even survive? He said, I befriended the guards and I ran errands for them. And I feel terrible about it now still. But he said, one of the things that I think about a lot is jazz. I think about how while I was going through that and all of my first memories were surrounded by this suffering, that somewhere people weren't suffering and that people were dancing. I'll never forget that. At first, it bothered me because I thought, how could people be dancing while Auschwitz is happening? But in fact, he's also doing what Borowski is describing. He's saying that That was some of him, but not the sum of him. That was some of the world, but not the sum of the world. And I feel this poem so deeply because it's not an escape. It's not a freezing moment in the flight or freeze. It's not depersonalization. It's actually a willingness to open up so widely that you could incorporate the whole world despite what you know about it. It's the Zen notion of not always so, not always so. And in our country, we have Black writers who write about space, like Octavia Butler, or Tracy K. Smith, or Sun Ra, the jazz great, who said space is the place. Space was the way to escape the structural racism of our system. So people are doing this all the time. The suffering is so great that it bursts them open to the point where they have this tantric experience of the whole world. And this is the way trauma can also sometimes trigger that mystical connection, and greatness can pour forth. So here's the poem one more time. The Sun of Auschwitz. You remember the sun of Auschwitz and the green of the distant meadows, lightly lifted by the clouds by birds. No longer green in the clouds, but sea green white. Together, we stood looking into the distance and felt the faraway green of the meadows and the clouds, sea green white within us. As if the color of the distant meadows were our blood or the pulse beating within us. As if the world existed only through us and nothing changed as long as we were there. I remember your smile as elusive as a shade of the color of the wind, a leaf trembling on the edge of sun and shadow, fleeting, yet always there. So you are for me today in the sea green sky, the greenery and the leaf rustling wind. I feel you in every shadow, every movement, and you put the world around me like your arms. I feel the world as your body. You look into my eyes and call me with the whole world. Getting back into that comfortable seat. How do we go from this is the sum of me to this is some of me? And then open up to this pain is some of me, but not the sum of me. In the essays I write about this, I think about 4 kinds of astonishment, 4 kinds of bewilderment. One of them is confusion. The world is bad. The world will hurt you. You have to protect yourself. Look what happened to me. We feel separate and cut off and lonely, but most of all, defended against bad things ever happening again. And I have to confess, I spent a lot of my life in that condition of confusion. Think about your confusion. That place where what's only some of you and some of your experience feels now and then like all the world. And then just open up, go into that space between, go into that not always so. Openness is another kind of astonishment or bewilderment. It doesn't give us any answers, it just is willing to have our heart broken. Letting down the drawbridge of the heart, or as I said last week, taking that spotlight and shining it slightly to the left of the old story. And then open wider into this space of awe. This is where Borowski goes. I feel you in every shadow, every movement, and you put the world around me like your arms. And you put the world around me like your arms, and you put the world around me like your arms. This is Mary Oliver's last lines of Wild Geese. The world calling out to your imagination, your place among the family of things. It's the same impulse as the end of Wild Geese. And then there's this grace that's possible. That's the fourth bewilderment. I'm bewildered because I feel like, why me? Why should I get to experience this? And yet, the moment you can imagine that it's yours, the whole world, Borowski says, is in him because even in that sliver of a moment, love is in him. I know exactly where he was looking. I was standing there looking at the crematoria in the midday sun, and there was a field behind it, and it was actually a very quiet place. I can see it right now in my mind's eye. Fusion to openness to awe, and then just acceptance of the grace. Softening the shoulders again. Feeling that easy communication between the heart and the head. and feeling the smile in your heart, smiling with your heart. How does that feel different? And smiling with your face or with your mouth or even your eyes. Just one breath. The Sun of Auschwitz by Tadeusz Borowski. You remember the sun of Auschwitz and the green of the distant meadows, lightly lifted to the clouds by birds, no longer green in the clouds, but sea green white. Together, we stood looking into the distance and felt the faraway green of the meadows and the clouds sea green white within us, as if the color of the distant meadows were our blood or the pulse beating within us, as if the world existed only through us and nothing changed as long as we were there. I remember your smile, as elusive as a shade of the color of the wind, a leaf trembling on the edge of sun and shadow, fleeting yet always there. So you are for me today, in the sea green sky, the greenery, and the leaf rustling wind. I feel you in every shadow, every movement, and you put the world around me like your arms. I feel the world as your body. You look into my eyes and call me with the whole world.